Good morning, Skallywags, and welcome to another exciting episode in a series of enigmatic events. I'm Spoo.
I'm AJ.
Today's episode is a bit of a weird one.
Yeah,
a little shorter than usual as well, but basically it comes out of the Stockholm area, and just let me say, while we do intend on doing some episodes involving cryptids and other kind of mythological creatures of legend, things like that, this is not one of those. So don't let the title of the video fool you.
it is, however, a murder. A brutal murder with a very unusual twist.
Yeah.
A twist that would lead media and the community to dub the murderer a vampire.
On May 4th, 1932, a 32-year-old sex worker named Lily Lindstrom was found murdered in her small apartment in the Atlas area of Stockholm, Sweden, near St. Eriksplan. She had already been dead for 2 or 3 days when police broke into her apartment after a friend of hers had reported her missing. Lily had suffered severe blunt force trauma to the head. And that might not sound too out of the ordinary.
No.
But then there's the rest of the scene.
Yeah. So Lily was found completely naked on her bed, face down. Her clothes were neatly folded in the chair next to her bed. And according to the police records, there was evidence of sexual activity right before her death. There was actually a used condom still found in her anus. I hated saying that, by the way.
I swear whenever I separated the script out on who's saying what, I did not plan that, but apparently it happens multiple times. So
Yay. Yay for me saying anus.
I'll take it over if
No,
you need me
you're
to.
good.
Okay.
Police detectives also found a ladle, like a soup ladle, on the floor, and it was like covered in blood. But then they discovered something a little unusual. They realized that Lily's body didn't have blood in it. It was completely drained of all blood.
Police actually speculated that the ladle had been used to drink Lily's blood. In addition to that, she also had traces of saliva on her neck and various other parts of her body. Now, it's important to note here that there were no bite marks, but there was a lot of saliva. This is back, way before there was DNA or anything like that, and it was still enough for them to notice it
and know
at
saliva.
the scene and know that it was saliva. Right.
After 2 to 3 days. So
Yes.
that's also a thing, like
If that
how much.
gives you an idea of how much there was.
Maybe he licked her. Oh,
Yeah.
No murder weapon was found at the scene, and actually police didn't know what actually caused the blunt trauma to the head. It was determined that the ladle was not the murder weapon. One, it was too light to actually cause that much damage, and two, there's no evidence that hair was embedded in it, and being blunt force trauma to the head, that would leave hair hair particles and stuff in the weapon, and there was none on the ladle, just blood.
In fact, despite the brutality of the crime scene itself, there was very little blood found anywhere on the crime scene. That, combined with Lily having no blood in her body, kind of led to the speculation that he had drank the blood, or at the very least had stored it in some kind of a container for, future use of some sort. And as for the ladle being assumed to be what they drank the blood from, that was based on just the sheer amount of blood stains that were found in the ladle itself.
Yeah, inside the...
Right, kind of in the scoop of it, and really not that much like on the handle and stuff like that, just primarily on the scoop itself. Given all of these elements, the sheer lack of blood on the crime scene, the lack of blood in the body, the fact that blood was drank at the crime scene, maybe some taken for later, this led the Stockholm press to basically dub the guy the Atlas Vampire.
The last person to see Lily alive was her friend and fellow sex worker, Minnie Jansen. She lives in the building with her, and she'd seen her a few days prior to the discovery of the body. Jansen told police that she saw Lily last a few days earlier when Lily came to her door asking to get some condoms to use. Minnie said this wasn't a strange thing for Lily, and actually it wasn't strange for Lily to show up naked at her door asking for condoms, but she got a little nervous and stuff when she hadn't seen Lily for quite a few days, and she's actually the one who called in the report to the police.
Right, apparently she showed up there often enough that for her to even go the following morning and not having seen her, she thought that was odd. But then 2 or 3 days passed, and she's like, okay, something's wrong.
So, like, Minnie was the condom hookup.
Right. Now, as far as suspects were concerned, there were a number of people that kind of fell at least under suspicion. Prostitutes being targeted for victims of murders, it wasn't exactly a new thing. You know, I mean, this wasn't too terribly long after Jack the Ripper, so it's been a thing for as long as murder and prostitution have been a thing. First things first, authorities kind of turned their attention toward the people that frequented Lily's services. The problem with that, as the police actually put it, was that there were simply too many Lilies in this area.
And we've got to clarify, Lily wasn't a streetwalker. She wasn't like out on the street. She was a call girl. So she had clients come back to her home. So, and this whole building was just a bunch of sex workers who worked there. So I can see the problem with trying to narrow down the suspect.
Yeah, that entire area, as a matter of fact, the entire, Sankt Eriksplen area was infamous at the time for its prostitution. And assaults on these prostitutes in this area was a completely common thing, especially in the 1930s. So at this point in time, Lily's killer could have literally been anyone.
Add to it the fact that this was during the Great Depression. There was a lot of farms and agriculture in the area outside of Stockholm, but they were suffering. So they had a lot of people coming into the city to actually try to find work and everything, and drifters and stuff. So that widened the suspect pool quite a bit as well.
Now, not only do you have regulars in the city, but you've got drifters coming in from outside that are also looking for a release. So, like we said, it could literally be anyone already. Now that picture just got a lot bigger.
The police had to turn their attention to what they did have, and that was the scene itself. Going by the used condom that was found still protruding from Lily's anus, thank you for making me say that twice, the police kind of had a theory of what had happened. They thought that the killer was actually in the middle of a sex act with Lily and struck her in the back of the head. There's been some speculation that he might have done this to enhance his orgasm. Thank you for making me say that too. But, you know, we don't know for sure what happened. We don't know if it was premeditated or what, but it seems that they were in the middle of sexual intercourse during the murder.
There was also the fact of how clean the murderer had left the apartment. Like we said before, there was almost no blood on the scene at all. Combined with the fact that her clothes are neatly folded right there next to the bed, police thought maybe they were looking for some kind of a neat freak.
Yeah, that's a little disturbing. A neat freak who likes to hit women over the head during sex.
Yeah.
I mean, okay.
So he likes it dirty and he likes it clean at the same time, is what you're saying.
Oh, no. That's not what I said at all.
Sure it is. Just not in so many words, but it's already been well established that I'm a terrible person. So.
Yes, he really is.
There you go.
All in all, the police did narrow it down a little bit to known Johns of Lily to 9 men. They were all questioned, interrogated, but none of them panned out. And that's kind of where the investigation ends.
Ends about as quickly as it starts.
The police never actually released any of their names or anything, so no one even knows who was investigated. So Lily's death has no conclusion.
So all that we're left with, pretty much, is theories and speculation. And there was a lot of that. Of course, there were the people that believed that whoever did this actually was a vampire. Basically, when you boil it down, there are 3 aspects of this case that kind of lead people to the whole vampire theory. Other than the press actually referring to it as the vampire murder.
Yeah, when the press gives a killer a name, it just kind of sticks.
Yeah. They probably would have ended up at this theory anyway. At least now in the internet age, they definitely would have. But this is 1932. But, like I said, there are 3 aspects in particular that kind of lead people down that little rabbit hole. One being the killer's kind of superhuman ability to evade the police, to avoid detection, avoid being caught. which
I mean, it's 3 to 4 days after the murder.
And I mean, okay, so it's an unsolved case, but if every unsolved case was a vampire, then
that would explain a lot.
That would explain so much. The second being the obvious, that the police flat out said that the murderer drank her blood. So, obviously, this holds a lot of merit.
The police said it.
Yeah. I mean, he drank blood. That's vampire. Period. End of story. So join us next week.
There's more.
There is. I mean, obviously, the authorities did kind of also say that if you were to drink that much blood, you would vomit. And there was also no vomit found at the scene. So that just furthered that whole theory.
Because fun fact, like, we as humans cannot process that much, like, actual liquid going into our bodies at once.
Right.
And blood is so high in iron that it would cause your liver to kind of go bad. Like, he would get sick. But unless he cleaned up his own vomit.
Yeah, true.
I mean, that's possible.
2 or 3 days goes by, the place is immaculate for the most part.
We don't know how long he stayed.
Right. He could have hung out there for quite a while. Like we said, obviously, no vomit, no blood equals vampire. Right? I mean, that is the obvious conclusion there. I mean, it definitely couldn't be that the killer collected her blood for, any other purpose. Literally any other purpose.
Well, we go into theory about...
We do. We'll get there.
Yeah. The community of sex workers themselves actually had a theory of their own, and that was that the killer was a cop. Now, this theory actually grew because back in 1930s, it seemed as though the killer cleaned up the mess a lot. And he didn't leave any evidence. He didn't leave any trace of himself. And so who would know how to do that but a cop? Also, they thought that because the scene was so bizarre that it was a cop's attempt to get his fellow police officers on the wrong track or whatever.
False leads.
Yeah. The problem I have with this theory is that by today's standards, there was a lot of evidence.
Oh, yeah. Like we said, I mean, there was enough saliva on the body for them to recognize it in 1932.
After days. Yeah. There was the used condom, which actually had semen in it. Yeah. There was hair found that they don't know whose it was.
And we'll get to an insane fact about all of that a little later, but just keep that in the back of your mind. The fact that all of this stuff was there.
Yeah. But the problem is, it was 1932 and there was no DNA testing.
Right.
Like, fingerprints were just a newish thing. People didn't even
Basically,
believe those.
The way they solved crimes back then were people confessed to them.
Yeah, and none of the 9 men who came in and were questioned confessed to them.
In fact, as far as like all of the stuff we were talking about it, the evidence being tested, that's actually something that they could still do today, and I'm honestly surprised that it hasn't been done.
Especially in this case.
Oh yeah, absolutely. All of the evidence that was gathered by the Stockholm police, that includes hair samples, saliva samples, even the condoms. Given the lack of suspects especially, why have these things not been tested yet? And the reason why I ask this is because, unlike many other cases from back in those days where the evidence has simply been lost to time,
or washed,
or whatever, as we've talked about in previous cases, all of the evidence from this case is, it's currently sitting on display at the Swedish Police Museum. You can literally walk in and see it right now. Maybe want to give it a test, you think? I mean, but why? All of this, these are all questions that don't have answers. And that just blows my mind.
I know. So many cases go unanswered because of lack of evidence. This one actually has enough evidence to at least narrow down.
Yeah. I mean, granted, whoever it was is I'm sure they're dead by now. I mean, it's been almost 100 years, but I mean, still, at least
to give the answers.
Yeah, at least you could close the book on the case. Can
you imagine if Jack the Ripper had left this much evidence?
Oh my God.
As far as unanswered questions about this case, about Lily's case, there's a new one that came up about 80 years after the murder. In 2012, a woman named Gloria Anderson penned a very interesting blog post. Gloria actually lives in the building. The building is still standing where Lily was murdered. And after watching like one of those true crime shows, I feel like it's like Unsolved Mysteries Swedish edition or something. she actually decided to do some research on Lily's murder. Anderson in her blog is the first person, at least in English writing, I don't know if there's anyone who did it in another language, who actually found out that Lily had an ex-husband.
Ooh.
That raises a new suspicion, a new suspect.
Right.
But because the police never actually released any of the names of the people they talked to, the 9 men, we don't know if Lily's ex-husband was one of them or not. We don't even know his name. It's never actually been released. There's just, she found a divorce decree or something. I would feel like that there would be a name.
I'm sure there probably is one. We just didn't find it in our
Yeah.
particular research. But I mean, we weren't really going that direction either. So to be perfectly fair, we didn't really dig into it. There is actually one other little possibility that would actually explain some of the stranger details in this particular case.
Now, this theory is actually one that...
It's a...
Well, during the research, I found like somebody said it looked like it sounded like a ritual.
Right.
And so I did some research on what kind of holidays or rituals were around that time period, and I found this, and I found it interesting. So
maybe a stretch, maybe
I don't
not
know,
so much.
I don't know if anybody else has come up with this theory.
Yeah.
So
this is a series of Enigmatic events exclusive, I guess. Yeah.
Maybe. We don't.
But basically, there is a holiday, and I'm going to butcher. I'm going to butcher this so bad.
Oh, it's so bad.
Okay, so Valborgs Masoften.
We do not speak any other language other than English.
This word here.
Yeah, you're gonna put it down.
Basically, this is it could be part of a kind of a strange twist on a ritual for that particular holiday, as the murder did happen to fall on that particular holiday. It's also known as Walpurgis Night, which is basically, it's the kind of Swedish version of, or the Swedish Christian version rather, of Beltane, if that makes it easier for you.
So it happens on April 30th through May 1st.
Right there on the spring equinox, right. While Beltane itself doesn't have any kind of rituals for human sacrifice. Basically, it is, the origins of Beltane was kind of it's a ritual for asking the gods of spring for protection. And back in the day in Ireland during Beltane, cattle farmers would actually sacrifice a cow or a calf or something, and then they would bring some of that blood and they would spread that upon the ground to kind of ask for protection for their cattle, for their crops, what have you. So the fact that Lily was murdered during this time, and the fact that her blood was either drank or taken away, or both, some have suggested that this may be some kind of a twisted person's twist on that particular ritual.
He had to have been a madman anyway, sure. So you don't know what's going on in his head. I just thought it was interesting that it fell on that holiday, and that holiday, even though there's no human sacrifice, that holiday does have a little bit of blood sacrifice, and sure. You know, they used to pour the blood and then set it on fire, which would also mean that if that was the case, then her blood is destroyed too. So yeah. But much like everything else in this case,
and everything that we cover,
we don't know the answers for sure. We're just throwing them out there for you. What do you think? Let us know in the comments. And be sure to check us out on all of our social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Also, be sure to like, subscribe. Hit that subscribe button.
Yes, we like when you do that.
Yes, and comment. That's really important for us. Shpoo answers almost all the comments.
Yeah, and we especially want your comments to let us know your thoughts on this particular story. Let us know your theories. But most importantly, drop us a comment and let us know what you would like to see next on a series of enigmatic events. Thanks for watching.